The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Cosmic Catastrophe on Revolution.radio, FreedomSlips.com. I'm your host, Diamond, from the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. This is my lovely co-host, Leah Shaper, joining us with fantastic earrings.
I just finished making them last night. Thanks for noticing.
We're going to have a great conversation today about multiple topics I've got up here. One that I just discovered this morning that's completely baffling. That'll be in the second half, and this has to do with some artifacts found in the mounds in the United States in the Mississippi Valley. Everyone knows about the mounds out there, and we'll talk about some pipes they found in these mounds. In fact, thousands of pipes.
Oh, interesting.
Also, things keep getting older. There is some type of things in the Sumerian culture. They just push back thousands of years, so we may get to that. But we're going to kick off the first half talking about supervolcanic eruptions in Europe. A new paper coming out discusses these supervolcanic, what they call megabeds, discovered at the bottom of the sea.
They are quite impressive and thick.
Yeah, they're massive, aren't they?
Yeah, like by comparison, right, the megabeds are like tens of meters thick, whereas what do you call the other layers that they compare to? I forget now.
Just sediment layers.
Well, no, I mean, but there's in this paper, they reference specific layers of other volcanoes that are, only a couple centimeters thick.
Right. And these beds are gigantic, 100 feet plus thick. We'll get to that in a moment. They're also compressed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that too. Yeah.
So
it's
they're
crazy.
thicker.
It's really crazy. It's a little hard to understand how that much material is generated.
Right. And what it reveals is that Europe, anybody living in near Europe was being destroyed every 15,000 years or so. Right.
I mean, of course, 15,000 years is quite a long time in comparison to the span of a human lifetime, but still. Obviously that has great propensity to interrupt, any developing civilization.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
So here's the article. Supervolcano megabeds discovered at the bottom of the sea point to catastrophic events in Europe every 10 to 15,000 years. 4 huge deposits from supervolcano eruptions over the last 40,000 years have been discovered at the bottom of the Mediterranean. So here are like some seismic or bathymetry maps, which are basically hypothetical cross sections of the Earth using different techniques. You can see the banding in here. These are this sedimentary different layers. You can also see how different parts of the basin drop down faster than others. It's pretty interesting to look at this. And you can also see what they have shaded here, the megabeds. These are volcanic eruption beds. So could be single events. Now, a single event may last weeks or months, maybe years in the case of these supervolcanic eruptions. But we'll get to that. So these supervolcanic eruptions were already known from where these volcano was. They just didn't know these ash layers were underground here until they did the study. That's what's pretty cool.
Yeah. Can you go back to the previous image for a second? I just want to point out one thing, and this is sort of discussed in this paper a little bit. I mean, you have to also consider that these megabeds are all showing up in a basin, right? I mean, you can see the vertical walls of this basin. So, I mean, I guess we have to assume that that's going to influence the thickness of the beds in the first place.
Yeah, and the distance from the volcano, right?
Yeah.
So, and in geologic terms, we call that proximal and distal. It just means close and far away.
Yeah.
Here's the paper. It was in Geology, Geoscience World here. 50,000 years of recurrent volcaniclastic megabed deposition in the Marsili Basin in the Tyrrhenian Sea. That's a mouthful. So guess, guys listening out there, guess what volcano erupted to create these beds? It's in fact been in the news. Campi Flegrei.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say Filegri. I added something to that. It's just
You added a vowel.
Flegrei.
That's hard to say.
It's so hard to say.
Yeah, with the L and the R there, that's tough.
Flegrei.
Flegrei.
Well, the good news is that there have been some seismic swarms at Campi Flegrei in the last few months, prompting evacuation orders of tens of thousands of people. They haven't been evacuated yet, but here we're looking at the current activity over the last 7 days underneath of that supervolcano, just some minor activity. So whatever was charging up has stopped, and it will take another flurry of activity before we have to worry again at Campi Flegrei.
I forget, when was the last time Flegrei erupted?
They have that data here.
Yeah.
But I don't have it up here. I will get that information. It erupts at all different scales. This is what we should all know. There are all different size calderas in the complex here. There are big ones and small ones. They think that Vesuvius's magma is connected to the Campi Flegrei supervolcanic magma.
Oh, that's interesting.
So when this erupts, Vesuvius will also erupt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the bad news there. And there are lots of people around this volcano. Now, let's talk about the big eruptions that have happened at Campi Flegrei, because that's what they found here at the bottom of the sea, as they call it. These 3 megabeds are from Campi Flegrei eruptions. Specifically, the oldest layer is a 40,000-year-old eruption. The next one is a 32,000-year eruption. And the third is an 18,000-year eruption. There's an even younger one, 8,000 years ago.
Well, that answers the question I asked a few minutes ago.
There have been hundreds of other eruptions since then. These are just the big ones.
The big ones. That's sort of what I was asking. Yeah.
So way more frequently, it erupts VEI 3 and 4. So these are the VEI 7 boomers.
Yeah.
And so these eruptions would literally darken the skies for a year or more, similar to the events of the worst year on Earth, which was what? Is that 536?
536 AD.
Yeah. So similar events happening here. So any hominids or people that are living in Europe would have been suffering. Now, what I find unique, and we'll get to that, is there might be a connection to Heinrich events. There are no explanation to what these Heinrich events are, but when you look at them in the record, so these shaded areas are the so-called Heinrich events. They occur on a rapid cooling followed by a rapid warming.
Interesting.
Right after the Heinrich event, the temperature rises almost instantaneously over 10 C. And no one knows what these Heinrich events, if you go look at the explanations, it's all very vague and wishy-washy. But something happens, and these only happen during maximum glaciation. So someone was just referring to a potential Heinrich event happening now. That it's impossible because we're not glaciated.
Well, well, also we're at a temperature peak at the moment, so it doesn't make any sense.
Right. So what you need is an ice cap, you know, like the Laurentide ice cap to get one of these events. And what I think is happening is a supervolcanic eruption occurs, and then massive rains for a year or more occur, and they break apart the ice sheet rapidly due to water erosion. Can easily destroy a glacier and put it into the ocean.
And that potentially would disrupt ocean currents as well, right?
Which is happening at this time, yeah. And then there's a salinity drop in the ocean, so fresh water.
Right.
So it fits all of the categories: supervolcanic eruption, Heinrich event. And you remember the dates? 18,000 is right here, Heinrich event at 18. 32,000 would be HS3, and there's one at 40.
Interesting.
That is quite interesting.
Yeah. I mean, especially in light of the fact that these particular events have to be absolutely enormous, right? Just based on the thickness of the bed.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So the first and the biggest is the Campanian Ignimbrite. More hard words. It's like, it's crazy. Ignimbrite.
Just call it the CI eruption.
Yeah, it's a major volcanic eruption in the Mediterranean during the late Quaternary, classified VEI 7. and it probably killed everything locally. I mean, I would say within 100 miles, everything's dead because you're going to be buried under 100 feet of ash or more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even eruptions that aren't that severe. Like I went and visited Pompeii when I was in high school, right? And you really get a sense of how much incredible instantaneous destruction that causes. It's fascinating. So this has to be completely insane, the effects.
Yeah, and it's just before 40,000. They're dating it at 38,000. This is a pretty specific date. 38, where the heck did I just see that? 3985 plus or minus 140.
Mm-hmm.
And that really lines up with right after that time, you would have the Heinrich event afterwards.
Right. However, it's interesting that this paper suggests that it's possible that while this is considered all one event, that it may have been multiple events separated by periods of time. That may be that this in and of itself may be the cause of the megabeds.
Okay, so just like I said, the eruption could last for a year, for the full deposit.
Sure. Yeah.
Multiple events. And they even allude to that in the description of the Campanian ignimbrite. Oh,
I'm sorry. Let me back up for a second. So, like, if the CI super eruption is 39 and change thousand years ago.
Yep.
They think that possibly, like, for example, that's impossible. One of these megabeds was actually at about 32,000 potentially. So it may be that this super eruption spread over like a period of like 8,000 years. 2
events. Yeah, that could be possible.
Yeah.
And then the other event is the Napoleon Yellow Tuff, which is another super volcanic eruption. Now, this one is interesting because it happened 15,000 years ago. And there's multiple dating sources on that. And in here, do they refer to it as 15,000? Yeah, they even talk about the 14.9 Napoleon. How do you say that? Neapolitan.
Neapolitan, yeah.
Oh,
it's hard to say because the vowels change and then the cadence of the word changes.
And that would be Megabed 2.
Mm-hmm. I mean, either way, however exactly these megabeds formed, I mean, obviously this area on Earth is like a pressure release valve here, right?
Yeah, and it's a bad place to be living in the sense, but where else are you going to live? Not near a supervolcano. That's pretty good advice.
I mean, it's so interesting just in light of the civilizations that have developed in this area, right? But we were also talking the other day about like, well, maybe this also helps explain all of the civilization that was developing in the cradle of civilization, further east.
Yeah,
to get away from this.
This is the edge of one of those drop-down calderas. Look at this. The people are inside the active supervolcano at the bottom of the caldera.
Right. Well, we're still in the we're still in the Dwapara Yuga, right? We're not particularly enlightened. We don't really consider supervolcanoes that only go off every 15,000 years, even though in geological scale that's quite often.
Yeah, it is.
Pretty short-sighted in our own lifetimes.
And so Campi Flegrei is getting active, but based on the type of activity that's been going on for a few years, geologists in that region and the experts of that system suggest that the eruption would only be VEI 3 or 4.
How can you know that?
Similar to how they know exactly how much magma is now intruded into Iceland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's based on the earthquake swarm and where the magma is coming from at depth, and then the size of the earthquake swarm, because the width of the earthquake swarm is going to be determined by where magma is pushing into rocks, cracking them, and making earthquakes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like assumptions they make.
Mm-hmm.
And the bad news about is that the current Iceland seismic swarm and the dike region that they have imaged suggests that it would be. There have been 3 eruptions there in the last 3 years. You've watched them, right?
Mm-hmm.
The eruption that could occur would be hundreds, if not thousands of times larger than any of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
And go all the way back to like 1700s when a similar eruption occurred.
Yeah.
So just lots of lava output. These aren't big, high up into the sky kind of things.
Right.
The only way this would affect air travel is if, and unfortunately, the 15-kilometer long area extends into the ocean about 3 kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
So if it started coming up there, you'd get phreomagmatic activity, massive steam and ash plumes, and then that would affect the air travel. If it just comes out on land, it's going to be really a nothing burger, but it will be a huge eruption, and I don't know if it would be so much of a tourist attraction.
I mean, it's like a slow-moving, slow-motion disaster, you know?
There might be too much gas to allow people to get near it because it's that big and you just die. But I'm sure idiots will go out there.
Oh, of course. Of course.
They banned drones over the area.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for a huge area in the whole region where the eruption may occur.
I wonder why they banned the drones. Like, what's the purpose of that?
Getting in the way of maybe helicopters or other people monitoring.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Imagine how many drones would be out there.
Actually, I sort of remember in the last Icelandic eruption that happened as well. There was some drone footage that was allowed, but it was like one person recording that was able to do it with permission, of course.
Yeah, so every 10 to 15,000 years, Campi Flegrei explodes in a big way. It hasn't happened for 8,000, one of these gigantic eruptions, which is good news, but so maybe the next super volcanic eruption here won't be for 2,000 years. And do you think civilization will still exist that far in the future?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I tend to think that we'll be here, but it's sort of hard to imagine what things will be like.
Yeah, I agree. So
I mean, and I don't mean it's this civilization that will be here. I mean, it'll be human beings with some other civilization after a collapse, right? There'll be a new one.
Oh yeah. What was the date of the one Napoleon Tough 15.5? That's right here where this Heinrich event 1 occurred.
Mm-hmm.
These Heinrich events are a natural phenomenon in geology that I learned about. Everyone does. And we know about them because of core samples we do in the coastal plain offshore continents. So we can go off in New Jersey and stick a huge core down and have a really good picture of what's going on through time. Mm-hmm. And when we look at that, there are these sediment deposits that are being rafted in. What I mean by that is that they came from somewhere else, far away. So they really are not explained by currents or anything like that. And then the idea was, they're coming in a glacier that floats down and then deposits the sediment here as it melts.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that is probably very high likelihood of what these Heinrich events are. There are massive amounts of glaciers. There have to be thousands of them moving south, hitting warmer waters, melting and dropping these sediments at very specific times. And they happen to be occurring at the coldest part of the glacial cycle. So it's not from heat. And at the very end of them, the temperature rises 5 to 10 degrees C.
Right.
Very
fascinating.
Weird. Yeah. They last for decades to hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years, some of them.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just explain it with a supervolcanic eruption because that's only going to affect climate in a big way for a few years, maybe a decade.
Right. Well, it's clearly it's kind of some kind of cyclic climate phenomena. I mean, it happens repeatedly again and again. The question is really just what is the cause and what perpetuates it?
Yeah. Now there's another cycle in here. So you see these smaller blips in temperature up and down about 5 to 10 degrees C.
Yeah.
These are 1,000-year, 1,500-year cycles that are called Dansgaard-Oeschger cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to say. Everything's hard to say. And look at these Donskard-Oeschger cycles look like they're getting packaged into groups here. See this cycle here looks similar to this grouping where there's one big one here and then smaller ones there. That's the same. It's like a repeating pattern. Another, that's the pattern again right here. Big one and two small ones just stretched out. There are so many things affecting the climate on our planet that we have not explained in any way. We have zero knowledge of what is forcing this. I mean, sometimes it's volcanoes and we can trace them, but look at how much the climate shifts.
Well, I mean, in essence, you know, we talk about this all the time. There's so many different variables that have some kind of effect on climate, and then all of those variables have an effect on all of the other variables. So it's very hard to tease apart the cause and effect here.
But looking at the graph, one thing is for sure, when the temperature rises in a big way, it's like instant. Every time, there's no slope. It goes straight up.
And not only that, but it also starts to
and then
fall
slowly,
right
you see
away.
how it slowly comes down in the ramp?
Yeah, like the pace of the fall in temperature is not nearly as strong, but every time there's that peak, it falls, right? That's the only way it can go, as we've discussed before.
Yeah, and sometimes straight down, like right here in the middle here, that could be a supervolcanic eruption darkening the skies.
Sure.
And then it changes the climate here for it looks like at least 1,000 years.
That's so significant. It's hard to imagine it's due to a volcano for that length of time, for 1,000 years.
Well, we got Toba right there, 72,000 years ago. That's right in there.
Yeah.
74, that's Toba. That's the extinction volcano.
Yeah. I mean, part of the problem here, right, is that we haven't actually witnessed a supervolcano in the last, whatever, 100 years, of course. Let's say in anybody's lifetime that's currently living on Earth. So this is part of the problem. Like, we don't really have a full mental sense of the scale of the effect of such an event.
So let's play it through. We have a supervolcanic eruption. The papers coming out in the last few years suggest that there will be no warning. Like we knew Mount St. Helens was going to erupt. It took weeks to build up. The mountain was swelling. There were thousands of earthquakes a second, and then it blew up. That may not occur at a supervolcano. It might just go. Or
what if it's like the opposite, right? That the buildup is so slow that you have, like, I don't know, a period of like 50 or 100 years where you have a smattering of earthquakes that keep happening, and we just kind of go, okay, whatever, that's what happens there. But really, that's the lead up to a major eruption.
Yeah, because we've never had this many billion people on Earth, first of all.
Right.
So what happens when you darken the skies for a year or more with the billions of people on Earth?
Well, it's even worse in a way, not just because of the population size than it would have been historically, simply because of, let's say, the way we grow food, right? We do monoculturing. We have these huge operations that are locked into place because of how large they are. And so we can't easily make an adjustment to feed people, because that would require moving an enormous operation somewhere else if the climate changes. Yeah. So, I mean, our ability to adapt the way we live now is basically non-existent. And in that sense, it is a huge disaster.
Yeah, especially for the solar industry.
Yeah. Right.
Well, when we come back, we're going to be sharing The American Naturalist. Came out April of 1882. It'll blow your mind. Also going to be talking about the ancient Sumerians. They invented water flumes thousands of years earlier than previously thought. Also, some exoplanets are shrinking, which proves that the accretionary model may not be right. What they're seeing is Neptune planets shrinking into rocky Earth-like planets.
Very interesting.
But these mound pipes that they found will blow your mind. First of all, they're made of soapstone, which comes from hundreds of miles away from this area. And they found literally thousands. These are effigy pipes. But this is what's going to blow your mind when we come back from the break is some of the types of animals that they were carving. What's also interesting is take a look at this. They're all on bases. They're all found on bases. Here's the smoke hole. See how hard that would be to make, first of all?
Yeah.
All made of a single piece of stone. And, these are just savage hunter-gatherers. There's an unfinished one. I mean, look at the face there.
That's fascinating. Awesome.
Yeah, we're going to blow your mind. Stay tuned.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who owns you? If you're not in control, then someone else is. Join me, Ivy West, for Voices on the Wind, Saturday. I discuss government, health, metaphysics, suppressed science, universal mysteries, little-known incredible facts, alternative energies, and even more than you can imagine. There was blood on the wire. Won't you join us on Revolution Radio Saturdays for Voices on the Wind with me, Ivy West. There are lives in the balance, people under fire, children at the cannons. Because if your head's in the sand, your tail is a target.
The Secret Kindergarten is here for the young children of the world. The best program on the radio for kids, dealing with the most important topics in the whole universe. Fairy tales, music and movement, numbers, plants, animals, fun, colors, insects. Take care and cast your ears out to catch a story from the world of other young things. Reach out, up, under, and over. Sing a song. Talk about feelings. Just remember the magic word. The magic word is no. Step on into the Secret Kindergarten. Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
Join me on the Brian Rouge Show on Revolution Radio, Eastern Standard Time, every Tuesday night from 6 to 8. We talk about the four most vital things, in my view, affecting all of humanity. Number one is UFOs and aliens and their agenda for the advancement of humanity. Number two is the Jewish establishment's control over all aspects of human civilization. Number three, the truth about Adolf Hitler, how he was the opposite of what we've been told. Number four is advanced ancient global civilizations. Join me on the Brian Rouge Show, Tuesday nights from 6 to 8 on Studio B on Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for the titillating second half of Cosmic Catastrophe on Revolution.radio. #1 listener-supported internet radio, supported by people like you. Just go to Revolution.radio and click Become a Patron. Up on the top there. It's easy to do. Welcome back to the show. I can't see you. It's weird. Can you see the screen?
See me? You can't see me?
No, I see Studio B right now.
Oh, that's weird.
But you see the bird, correct?
I sure do.
Okay, so let's get back to the mound culture. For those that don't know, east of the Mississippi or around there, Mississippi and east, was a culture that lasted for thousands of years that just recently disappeared maybe 1,000, 1,500 years ago with no traces. There's a lot of study, and the bad news is that most of these mounds were pillaged in the turn of the century as people moved west. They simply dug into them and stole everything and ruined the archaeology.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it's missing or hidden in someone's attic.
Yeah.
But they did catalog lots of it, and they found thousands of these pipes. Now, what's also unfortunate is the archaeology around the mound culture. The archaeologists have named them different people, like Adina and Hopewell, simply as the time gets older and older, claiming that they're different groups. It's my opinion they're the same group, and the evidence is some of these mounds in the South were dated all the way to the base being as old as 11,500 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Hopewell and the Adena cultures would have been 2,000 years ago to about 500 AD. And so all these people are using the same mounds and adding to them for thousands of years. These are the same Native Americans living in the same place for the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why you end up with these different names is simply because the archaeologists are finding, they find a set of artifacts that all seem to go together, right? And then you find a different set of artifacts that have different characteristics. Well, this isn't surprising if you're separated by a couple thousand years, right? But to assume that they're different people is obviously really silly because people reproduce and continue on into the future. And what happened to the previous culture? It just went poof? I mean, that doesn't make sense.
They disappeared. Aliens.
Right. So
what happens is your culture is changing, right? And then and your technology's changing and the way you do things changes.
I mean, to be fair, I think there is some level of objectivity that is involved in using different names for these cultures simply because there are differences in the artifacts and you don't actually know that these people are related, right? So to say this group of artifacts is this culture and this group of artifacts is this culture initially, I think, is fair because you can't necessarily demonstrate a connection. But over time, as you're pulling up artifacts, let's say from the same mound, like you have to assume they're related.
Now, you ready?
Yeah.
So these effigy pipes are all the same. They are all on a base. They're all hand carved out of a single piece of stone. And look, an otter. They're based on animals in the area. A beaver, a heron.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's a lot of herons near the Mississippi River, so they must have known about herons near the ocean. There might be herons on the Mississippi.
There probably are.
Here's a representation of what they actually looked like. They look like Native Americans.
Fascinating.
Don't they?
Yes.
And this could be 2,000 years old from this mound.
Right.
A bird. We all know. I don't know what bird this is. Looks like a dodo, some extinct bird. But
yeah.
And that's kind of a grouse.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready? A goose.
Mm-hmm.
There's a groundhog. That could be a howling wolf, maybe, or a really bad bear.
Not with that long tail.
That's not a lizard. That's a salamander, clearly.
Uh-huh. Yeah. We've
they
seen
made
those.
a lizard pipe.
Yeah.
There's a turtle.
Yeah.
Snake.
Huh?
Frog.
Okay.
Bear. Uh-oh. Elephant.
Oh, look at that.
And there's another one.
Wow.
2 elephant pipes found in Iowa in a mound.
Did they try to date these at least by stratigraphy?
No, not in this, but they're probably they're probably 1500 years old. That's when like most of the awesome carvings are from, 500 AD. So how the heck do Native Americans in Iowa know about elephants? And there's 2 examples. That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Wow.
are they mammoths?
I mean, they look like elephants, frankly. They don't look like mammoths.
It's
That's
bizarre.
so interesting.
So this would suggest that Native Americans came from Egypt or Africa or that region.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
But also, they would have had to carry
India,
even if they came from Asia somewhere, that still would have been long before these were carved, don't you think?
Yeah, so how do they
you would have had to carry the knowledge of an elephant and what it looks like with you for thousands of years, generationally. Like, that seems so unlikely.
To then bury it in a mound. You know, let's say you passed it down for 10,000 years, then you just bury it in a mound with Uncle Mike with 100 other pipes.
Well,
now,
also,
these pipes are from that time, so how did they know 1,500
how
years
are
ago
you going to carry on the accurate image of an elephant for thousands of years like that? Like, you could describe it orally, but it'll be like a game of telephone. By the time it gets to your descendants 10,000 years later, this elephant's going to look completely different. But this looks like an elephant, you know?
Yep. And they're in association with beautiful copper axes. This is the group that's mining Michigan, the copper mining. And they found this, the Phoenicians had some of this copper in one of their ships. So these Native Americans that are mining this copper were interacting with the Phoenicians. Maybe the Phoenicians had an elephant on a ship.
I noticed in the image that you had up in the break that in the text, there's the description of a little copper awl. That was probably
there was one found here, a
broken
broken carved stone pipe, small, beautifully formed copper axe and this elephant pipe.
Yeah.
There's always copper axes with these pipes.
Yeah. Yeah. And awls apparently as well.
Interesting. It could be that we have there is a society traveling the world with ships and there's lots of interactions that we are unaware about.
That to me seems to be the most likely explanation, right? Like, let's say 2,000 years ago, you have Native Americans trading with, I don't know, Phoenicians.
But did they have an elephant on a ship?
I don't know. Maybe there were natives that went back to Egypt with these people. I mean, obviously we're being completely speculative here, but like, that really would seem to be the best explanation for this. One thing that is funny about these elephants is the ears. Like this pipe, where are the ears? And the other pipe, the ears. Oh, okay. I see. They're sort of flopped down.
This looks like a chicken leg.
Yeah, it's a little strange. Wow, this is so interesting. Do they have an explanation in this text for why they think there were elephant pipes?
I didn't read that. I didn't read it that deeply.
Yeah.
The existence of an artificial mound in Wisconsin that's 135 feet in length in the form of an elephant adds much to the probability of the genuineness of the pipes above described.
Well, the other thing they say later, too, is they note the absence of tusks.
It is worthy to note no representation of the male elephant has yet been found amongst the remains of man in North America. It is, to say the least, a singular fact that the most characteristic features of this pachyderm, the prominent tusks, should have been omitted both in the pipe structures and the big elephant mound if the ancient Americans were acquainted with the model. The long, slender, curved tusks, however, would be difficult to imitate either in the miniature stone sculptures or in the embankments of earth and might have been purposely ignored. Yeah, because these effigies are quite rounded.
Yeah.
But I doubt it.
But also, what is the big elephant mound? What is that about?
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
We need to look into that.
The existence of an artificial mound in Wisconsin in the form of an
Oh.
elephant.
Okay, that's even more bizarre. So not only do we have knowledge of elephants, but if there's a mound in an elephant shape, then that would to me suggest that the elephant is being revered in some way.
The so-called elephant mound in Grant County. I just found it. There it is.
Whoa. Which appears to, oh no, I guess that could just be the trunk. I was going to say appears to have tusks.
Could be a unicorn. The
How
discovery of the elephant effigy was made by Mr. Jared Warner of Patch Grove, Grant County, and the account was first published in the Smithsonian Report of 1872. The survey of mounds, and it's always the Smithsonian, right? They cover it up.
It's like they're like, oh, there's a mound in the shape of an elephant in 1872, and they're like, well, we can't explain like that, so let's just put it in the archives and shove
We
it in
got
the
these
back
two
room.
elephant pipes too. They don't make any sense.
We don't understand this, so we're just going to hide them.
The survey of the mounds in the neighborhood of the so-called elephant effigy, which was undertaken under the auspices of the Wisconsin Academy of Arts, has not, for various reasons, been reported until now. The survey was conducted by the writer mainly during the year 1885, but a trip previous in 1882 and subsequent in 1886. So there it is. A railroad has been built along the valley of the Mississippi, and the track has been laid on the very midst of the mounds that were surveyed. Before giving a description of the survey, we propose to give history of this effigy. So they just destroyed it. That's typical.
That's terrible. Wow, this is really interesting. And I'll say it again. Like, to me, this really suggests that the elephant was being revered in some way, which is pretty bizarre for a continent that didn't have elephants.
Yeah, and this is another one on opposite sides of the river.
Is it? I mean, it doesn't even have a trunk.
Look, they have like dinosaurs here too and stuff. A bird, the elephant. No, this one doesn't have a trunk.
So how do you even claim that's an elephant? I mean,
I don't claim that's an elephant.
Right,
They
right.
don't.
How do they?
There's the one elephant, a bird. It looks like a dinosaur. Look at that, brontosaurus. No, that could be a beaver.
It could be a beaver. I mean, come on. Looks like a beaver.
This is just weird that all, and plus we found those effigies that are in South, where are they? Idaho, that we need to go back out to.
Yeah.
So something was going on back here. Look at all these animal effigies everywhere. I didn't know there were so many.
Yeah.
So this has all been hidden from us, and they just burned the books. It's like no one's talking about this.
Yeah.
A so-called elephant mound. We got elephant pipes. This is crazy. What's going on here with these Native Americans and elephants? They didn't have horses. They had elephants.
Right. Well, clearly they didn't have elephants, right? There's no evidence of elephants existing in North America in a long, 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 long time.
No.
So, I mean, again, the easiest, the simplest explanation, which is often the best one, would be to suggest that there was trading going on in this time frame that we're unaware of or refuse to acknowledge.
Yes, I would agree with that. And they can't really be mammoths. If they were going to be mammoths, we would also see like saber-toothed cats or other Ice Age animals in these pipes.
Yeah.
But we don't. They're all just normal stuff that was alive 1,500 years ago.
Well, that's the other thing about this, though, that really bothers me. It's like all of the other animals, pipes that we showed. I mean, those are all creatures that exist in North America. And then suddenly there's this elephant. And you're like, what? So that's the other. You would think that if the elephant is something special to you, then maybe it would be distinguished in some way from the other carvings, but it appears to be just like them.
And this looks like a poison dart frog from Mesoamerica. So maybe they did know about all these animals around the world. This would have been used for hunting.
Yeah.
The poison on the animal.
Well, and maybe, it'd be so interesting to get like a full catalog of all of the pipes that were ever found. I don't know how much of what was found this is represented in this paper, but
yeah,
like if they were cataloging all of the animals that they were aware of, Perhaps that's the explanation. But still, in order to do this elephant pipe, you need knowledge of what an elephant looks like. And clearly these people had it because this pipe really looks like an elephant. So where did that
And
come
these
from?
pipes are ceremonial. I have a book on the pipe, the peace pipe, and what it's used for. It's used in ceremony. So it's like what they're revering the elephant in Iowa.
Yeah, it's not insignificant because it's not only what you just said, but it's also the time that it's going to take to do these like pretty detailed carvings. You've got people sitting around working on this, and it's like, okay, obviously there's purpose behind this. Like they're not doing this because they're bored.
Yeah, very fascinating.
Yeah.
Mind blowing. And then the so-called elephant effigy, which they just plowed over and put a railroad track on. Thanks, guys.
I shouldn't laugh. It's really a travesty.
So here, things keep getting older. Ancient Sumerians invented water flumes thousands of years than previously thought. Interesting. And I can't read it because I didn't pay. So that's as far as we get, folks. Paywall.
Well, I don't know. I mean, when we talk about any kind of structures that involve water, I don't really think we should be surprised, right? Like, obviously, this is an essential part of life. Like, okay, when we go to Sankawi in New Mexico, and there are these carved channels everywhere, and the official archaeological narrative is that this was just worn down by people walking these paths over a long period of time, which is absurd, especially in light of how smooth those carved channels are. It's obvious that they were channeling water, and of course they were, because they're trying to live, So it's, again, we're underselling people's capabilities always.
Here, I just hacked
and their
the article.
Technology.
It says ancient Sumerians invented a civilization-saving water channel 4,000 years ago, a British museum dig has revealed. Archaeologists working in the ruined city of Girsu in Iraq have discovered the true function of a mysterious structure created by the civilization. The inhabitants of the ancient city created a device known as a flume to propel water to distant locations where it was needed thousands of years before the technology was thought to have even been discovered. The Sumerians, who were the first people to tell early versions of the biblical story of the flood, appeared to have devised this anti-drought machine in an effort to preserve a way of life threatened by vital canals drying up.
Again, I think it's very naive to be surprised by this, because water is clearly essential to life. People were there. We know they were there because we're still here. Of course, they're going to be developing technology around the movement of water.
Water is life.
Yeah.
And some exoplanets are shrinking. So exoplanet scientists have enough data now to say that the gap is not a fluke.
The gap? What is the gap?
I don't know. Let's get to it. The air around a few planets beyond our solar system is leaking into space. Well, that's not new news. Our atmosphere is leaking into space right now as we speak. But they go on to say it's causing these worlds to get smaller. Astronomers reported on Wednesday that these planets' atmospheres aren't getting blown away by harsh winds from their stars, you might expect, but rather by their own doing. About 90 tons of air from Earth's protective blanket, responsible for sheltering life, is known to escape into space every day because our atmosphere gets heated by the sun. At this super slow rate, however, scientists think it would take our planet 15 trillion years to be completely stripped of its atmosphere, except that they don't account for, I guess, super flares or anything like that. Yeah, that's a stupid statement. But a few exoplanets, especially some bigger than the Earth but smaller than Neptune, are actually pushing away their atmospheres from within through a process known as core-powered mass loss, a new study finds. This mechanism is believed to be able to shrink a puffy sub-Neptune planet all the way down to a rocky super-Earth. Wow.
I mean, how many times have we talked about the possibility of stars becoming like red dwarfs, becoming gas planets, becoming rocky planets, becoming asteroids, or any rocky small
Becoming
body.
stardust, becoming humans,
Right. Right.
and so on.
Not the accretion model, right? Not this silly.
But exoplanet scientists have enough data now to say that this gap is not a fluke. And the gap they're saying is that there are no giant rocky planets bigger, as big as Neptune. They're all
Right.
gas giants. Duh.
Right. Right. Right.
So it is a process. It appears as if we go from a Birkeland current of energy to a Z pinch. Then you get a star. Then a star probably can erupt out its core, maybe even, or portions of it. I think stars can erupt out other stars, which then can cool down and become gas giants, which then apparently through core mass loss or whatever the word core powered mass loss.
Yeah, I'm really curious to know how they define that. I'm going to look into that because that's bizarre. Not bizarre, but I'm very curious to know what their explanation of the process is going to be.
There's an alternative view, but unlikely. The theory for these sub-Neptunes is a phenomenon called photoevaporation, in which a planet's atmosphere is blasted away due to the star's radiation like a hairdryer on an ice cube.
The process is thought to, can you scoot back up a bit?
Yeah.
It's thought to occur only in the first 100 million years of a planet's birth. What if it's a result of a star's radiation, then why would that be the case?
Yeah. Interesting. Did you watch the interview with Ashton Forbes?
I did.
People hated me in the comments.
Oh yeah, I didn't look at the comments.
Oh, they said I was rude and I kept interrupting. I didn't.
You did
I
interrupt.
thought we were having a conversation. I interrupted, but because he was talking about shit that no one knew, I was trying to get like the basics out first so people understood what we're talking about.
What I was going to suggest is to do another interview, because what was happening was that he was getting into some of the details, which were very interesting. And then you would interject just to like push the conversation forward. And so that I think people would know. I was noticing that, like, I would want to hear that detail, but then the conversation moved on. So like a second conversation where you could get more into the details of his process uncovering all of this would be really interesting.
What do you think about the footage?
I mean, the footage is fascinating. I mean, a lot of it I feel like hinges on all of the people involved in the footage being out there, right? Like you need someone who knows how to verify the date that footage was leaked and all of that. And he obviously knows how to do that. So as long as he's a trustworthy person, which he seems to be, I mean, and granted, that's just a subjective observation. It's not necessarily the truth. But based on all of that, like it does seem rather trustworthy. I'd love to see the footage slowed down at the moment the quote unquote portal or whatever it is opens up.
He's got all these different videos of that on his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that you all go there and check it out. The problem is that I don't have it parsed up here so we can actually go look at it. It's in this 2 hour and 41 minute podcast right there.
I mean, I'm a little worried for him, honestly, because obviously there's been some kind of great effort to push this under the rug. I don't know.
Yeah, and so on his YouTube channel, in a lot of the things, he covers up like the whole event. He researched the whole event. First, he's researching where these videos came from. The one is from a military drone. The other one is from a satellite. He confirmed that the satellites were in the area, taking the shots at the right angle, and they were. And then he started to go through like the way the media was going through it and the way the government down there was dealing with it with the families. They basically got paid off to not ask any more questions. The pieces they have found, no one knows where those are. The pieces they confirm were from the ship.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's all very sketchy. Look how big the plane is. I mean, look at how many people.
Yeah. I'm actually particularly curious about, because he talked about the sort of infrared heat map layer that was added later, and I don't understand how you do that accurately. So I'd be interested to hearing a little bit more about that, because obviously a big piece of this is that when the quote unquote portal opens and it's black, meaning it's very cold.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant. Yeah.
Wow. So go check it out. This will be on Magnetic Reversal News tonight, 8 p.m. Check it out, folks, our YouTube channel, and become a Patreon of Revolution Radio. Be safe.
Bye.
Hey, dude.